All right. Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our presentation on building resilience, but for whom and how. My name is Upando de la Gama, and I'm an intern working for the International Water Management Institute, or as most commonly referred to, IMI. As a way to gain your insights beforehand, we ask that you answer the following question. In one word, what does resilience means to you? And thank you for all your responses. And as you can see on the word clouds that generated, the word resilience has so much weight attached to it. So, I mean, some of you may be wondering if such a young intern like myself has the capability to introduce a new project on such a complex topic. But then I do ask you again, why shouldn't youth take the center stage? Globally, 1.2 billion people on this earth are between 15 and 25 years. And therefore, it provides us with great leverage to use our voices as we are the future decision makers to live with the consequences of today's actions or inactions. It's today's young people who are the first generation to feel the impacts of climate change and who will be the last generation to be able to mitigate its worst effects. And during this whole week, there's been so much talk about resilience, but whose viewpoints and voices are really being heard? My colleagues will speak about this in more detail, about our project, about how we want to enable the voices and experiences of the most marginalized, for them to be heard and to be informed of change. But here, just right now, I do want to add that for the last 2 years, the youth have been hit really hard. We're facing a future not just of climate uncertainty, but also economic and political uncertainties. I'm thinking here of all the young women and youth in general in Afghanistan right now, how quickly their situation reversed, and how these changes really hit my generation the most. We face a whole future of uncertainty, which is precisely why Greta Thunberg and so many other young climate activists are trying to make these issues more evident. It is important, therefore, that as a young intern working at IMI, my voices is needed to be heard. And this is why I'm opening the session on resilience, but for whom and how. To reflect on the concept of resilience entails diving into the complex issues of agency, power, and rights. We need to build our understanding on the need to better unpack the survival strategies that marginalized groups already implement in the face of complex challenges. What enabling factors and conditions provides them with the ability to bounce back from climate shocks? Trying to answer these questions acknowledges that there isn't one definition of resilience. Depending on the population and the multiple physical, social, economic risks that they experience within their local environment, resilience strategies may be quite diverse, which emphasizes that there is no one shared vulnerability as there is no one shared climate crisis. As outlined in a paper by John Mambretta, who is here today, resilience may be defined as an outcome where the attention focuses on adapting to extraordinary circumstances, or resilience can be defined as a process, focusing on the mediating factors that enable positive outcomes in the wake of adversity. Depending on the situation, resilience strategies will differ across regions, and there is no one-size-fits-all solution. And that's what makes this project interesting and unusual at the same time. We're moving away from top-down hierarchical climate politics and instead empowering bottom-up grounded realities to design climate intervention that will benefit all of them. In essence, we are decolonizing climate action by becoming aware of how exactly climate change impacts local vulnerable communities who have consistently been excluded from participating. By making the voices of those most marginalized be heard, we get to understand how climate challenges intersect with other social injustices, such as racism, sexism, class, and gender. And even more deeply, how gender intersects with other relationship factors like age, ethnicity, caste, women's access to resources or status of infrastructure, and so on. To capture these experiences and perceptions, we'll be applying a digital ethnographic tool SenseMaker to analyze how these groups experience climate risks and understand the factors that enable their resilient strategies. Additionally, we will use SenseMaker to enable reflection by key institutional stakeholders to share how and why the climate strategies they implement tend to be exclusionary. Most often, climate interventions such as index-based flood insurance schemes have been largely biased towards benefiting only large farmers, while in reality, it is the small marginal farmers and female-headed households that are the most vulnerable to floods. Acknowledging these gaps and limitations in climate action, and with the desire to shift from exclusive to inclusive strategies, this project will apply a feminist political lens where we place gender to be a critical variable in analyzing power relations. We will immerse ourselves in the group realities by creating spaces and opportunities to hear and listen to marginalized women, enabling and empowering them to dialogue with policy stakeholders, and making sure their challenges and their strengths inform climate interventions. To help this project come to life, we will be collaborating with Sumat, a nonprofit social enterprise, and together, we will provide a voice to those who have remained voiceless for some time. Therefore, without further ado, I introduce Sumat, who will present how resilient institutions create resilient communities. As well, if you have any questions or opinions, please record your opinions in chat, please, on Passable. Thank you. Over to Sumat.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Panda. So, once Mahatma Gandhi usually used to say that the soul of India lies in the villages. But even after 75 years of independence, the real India, the villages of India, is suffering from poverty, casteism, and discrimination. So a young bunch of youngsters, young professionals who has roots in the villages are taking a step to empower the villages by engaging the most marginalized and the vulnerable community, especially the women, by empowering them with extra livelihood opportunity to generate extra income for their better livelihood. The journey of last 6 years was very tough and challenging. A lot of challenges which has been faced in terms of socio-economic criteria. But despite of it, we have made a good progress. And here is the data. Can you the next slide, please? So this is our team. So this is the data. If you see, next slide, please. If you see revenue growth, like in 6 years, 1.5 lakh rupees to 300 lakh rupees. But again, here the question arises, being a not-for-profit, how you are making profit? So all the profit part or the revenue part is going to the community. It's owned by a farmer producer company, which is again owned by these farmers only. No other can become a member or owner of this community. And if you see the farmer base, we have gone from 12 to 15,000. Income for the farmer has gone from 15 lakhs to 2,500 lakhs. But is that enough? No, it's just a drop of ocean because we work in Bihar. Can you have the next slide? Next slide, please. Bihar, which has one of the largest human capital in India. But again, we are also one of the largest poor family survivor. Just imagine 80% of our population is dependent on agriculture activities. But how much money that activities are generating? Just 20%. Again, I would like to quote the thing which we have seen, observed in our field areas in Gaya, in Bihar, that Bihar is a consumer state. Let's take an example where we are one of the largest producer of onion, mushroom, and baby corn in Bihar. Let's take an example of onion. So we grow onion around more than 20,000 tons. That we primarily harvest in the season of in the month of April or May. So we only sell those onion in May, April or May. But rest of the year, we are exporting, we are importing onion from other states of India. It is worth of like 100 crore rupees. So why it is happening? Because we don't have proper infrastructure. We don't have storage. We don't have processing. And Bihar lacks industry. That's why large chunk of population is migrating. Also, there are two type migration. One is the people who speak English. That number is very small, but the large number who are primarily the laborer, they are migrating to the other parts of world and India. And who are these laborers? These are primarily from the lower caste, people known as Mahadalits in Bihar. So I will focus on that. But if migration is happening, then who is the biggest sufferer? Can you have the next slide? Next slide, yes. So the biggest sufferer is if the migration is happening, it's primarily of the male, then the whole burden comes to the female. And in India, when a woman who is working in the home, the household, that work is never counted by the family, by the society, or by the government. So that is by default, it comes that if you are a woman, then you have to do all the household, and it doesn't matter how many hours you are doing. But if migration is happening, then they have extra and extra, like you can say the triple XL burden on them, because they have to take care of now the field work also, outside home. So taking care of their children, education, health, food, and then earning money. I will give you an example because we primarily grow paddy. And paddy, again, a crop, this is not beneficial for the small and marginal farmer. I will give you just a stat. So 1 acre of land in Gaya, in Bihar, if you are in Gaya, gives you around $250. And again, you need labor times, like 30 days, and it's a crop cycle around. Am I audible? Hello, am I audible?
Yes, Prabhat, you're good. Thank you.
Crop cycle is
it's a bit breaking up.
About 30 days. No, I saw some big signal. So the crop cycle is of 6 months. Then you have the employment opportunity only for the 30 days. And most of this work, the real labor work is done by the woman. Just Google and we put like transplanting, weeding, sorting, grading. You will only find the women who are doing all this work. And what they are getting? They're getting less wages than the male counterpart. So despite of doing all these things, despite of getting all work done, they are not recognized as a farmer. And I will show you the data, which is from the flagship program of Government of India. You can just look at the gender-wise data. 86% of the beneficiaries are the male. Only 14% are the female. So despite of doing both the work, both at the household level, field level, they are individual farmers because they are not recognized by Government of India or Government of Bihar. So again, the crop cycle is changing. And who is again the biggest sufferer? The woman. So it also leads to the domestic violence because things are not going as per plan. So can we have the next slide, please? So this picture depicts what is happening really at the grassroots level. And I will tell you what is happening because there is so much dependency of agriculture on women. So the timing, usually the timing for the labor timing is 9 to 5 p.m. But here, because their dependency is so much, the big farmers or the farmer who are employing this women, they schedule the timing according to their convenience. So the timing is 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. because at 2 p.m. the lunch time, then from 3 p.m. to 4 or something like that. So the timing is according to the convenience of these farmers, the women farmer. And again, I will tell you, but does it lead to something that we are resilient agriculture? Answer is no, because they know the farming practices, they are involved, but there are other stakeholders who are also determining the complete cycle of agriculture, like input materials. They need seed and fertilizer. Who is providing? Who is going to provide these input materials? It's primarily the dealers who are again the male, and language is not very sophisticated, right? Sometimes it's abused. Then you have the training. And again, training goes to with the training. It means the apart from the paddy, new crops like mushroom or onion, some new methodology, new technology. Who is going to train? Primarily the government or some NGO. Again, it's a not complete cycle. They have to depend upon them. The third is, if produce is good, then who is going to sell them? Again, you have to go to the different traders or the middleman. So the complete cycle is not with the farmer. So again, the decision making not with them. And if you see after marriage, these women go to the home of the husband. So again, the land in the name of husband, the male. So even as per government record, they can't become the authorized or the certified farmer because the land is not in their name. So we have observed all these things in the last 6 years. Based on our observation, the challenges both in terms of socio-economic, caste, class, and gender, we come with a model. Can we have the next slide? Next slide, please. So here we provide 360-degree solutions. Like you need machines like tractor. You have never seen, like I have not seen any lady farmer who do the like driving of the tractors. So if you need farm machinery, we will provide you at the household level. You need input material, it will be provided at your house level. You have to just interact with your nearest village champion, someone who is from the community, or a field officer, or you just phone call. Just everything is in your touch. Then training, both in the terms of methodology, latest technology is provided again at the household level. And the crux is follow-up is there, that you don't get disturbed. If something bad is happening, maybe because of various reasons. And if there is a produce, you are free to sell to anyone. It's not that we are doing, you are free to sell, but we are always there to procure it again at your household level. And just an example of you can see the mushroom, we have created a mushroom training module on the mobile phone, and people are very interactive. This marginalized farmer who have never done such type of training online, they are doing it and they are enjoying it. Most of our farmers have used Zoom or Google Meet during this COVID time. Can we have the next slide, please? Yeah. So the point is, if you really want sustainability in the agriculture, you need to focus on the women. They are the present and they are the future. And also, we have to develop agriculture intervention in such a way that young people like us, they get interested. Otherwise, agriculture is right now not for the future generation. And if you want resilience or sustainability in this sector, you have to create an environment or ecosystem which minimize their risk, whether it's due to drought or the flood. So we have that like mushroom, which is completely reverse of the traditional agriculture. In traditional agriculture, you have recurring expenses and everything goes well, then you have one-time income. But here, if you're doing mushroom agriculture, which we are provided, just then you have one-time investment and recurring income for next 4 months. And after that, the wastage is used as a fertilizer. It also gives the nutritional supplement to the family. So this is just one aspect of the story, just one aspect, little aspect of the life of a rural woman, marginalized, the Mahadalits, and the caste-wise, I'm not going that detail. But there are such more aspects. That I will give you an example of Gayatri Devi. Last slide, please. So Lutua is one of the most notorious villages, highly Naxal affected village from like 50 kilometers from Gaya town. And Gayatri Devi, a Mahadalit woman, who is doing traditional agriculture, move to new crop, but still, is that enough? No. She has a lot of other aspirations, like can her children study in English medium schools? Can she have a coffee? Can she go to mall? Can she become mukhia or some village representative? A lot of aspirations are there. So under the project which we are doing with IMI, we are going to capture all these stories, different angles, all the aspirations which you will see. And now I will invite John to come in and present how he is going to cover, what is the methodology, what is the sense maker he is going to use to cover all this story unheard. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhat. Before John comes in, we will allow at least 2 to 3 clarifying questions for Samart. If anybody wants to know more about what they're doing and how we're focusing on women-led households and how they're so important and critical right now to building resilience, please ask your questions, unmute yourself, or you can just paste your questions in the chat on the Passable app. You're welcome to.
Can you hear me?
Yes, if anyone has no more questions, should we at least one more minute? Don't be shy.
Excuse me. Yeah, excuse me, Dipesh this side. I guess chat
Thank
is not open. Yeah.
On the
Chat box is
Passable
not
app?
working. Yeah.
Oh. Paul, is that for me the Passable app chat is working. Is it working for you, Paul? Sorry, there'll be a technical support is going to be looking into this right now. But if you have any questions, please, you can just unmute and just ask us. Is there any way we can enable it then, please?
I think the chat message could be typed on the Pathable app.
Yeah, but if you have any questions, you can just ask us right now since you're on mute. Anyone does. If not, we can always come back at the end.
So I have a question to Prabhat sir.
Prabhat sir, thank you.
What are the different programs are going on to minimize the this resilience to the minor group or the socially disadvantaged group in the Bihar or in the country?
Thank you. So we primarily deal in onion, mushroom, and baby corn. Right now, these are our focus crop. So we ensure that everything is covered. And we, as I mentioned, we provide complete end-to-end solutions in the intervention which we do. And we have defined critical intervention, like we think sowing is important. I will just give an example like seed treatment. That is a very critical intervention which cost you around like 50 rupees per kg. And it was not done before our intervention. But when we started, now 90% of our farmers were involved. They are doing seed treatment, which is at least saving 1,000 rupees of their intervention, like in terms of input cost. So similarly, we do a lot of things in defining the critical intervention like sowing. So we have a methodology, we have 1 or 2 minute video, we have a module. So we provide all these things and everything is provided at the household level. And also we provide,
do you believe that by providing this seed treatment plant, they are empowering themselves? As you mentioned, there are the various factors just as caste, class, and gender.
Yeah. See, until unless there is some, if they see the result, it's benefiting, at least in terms of economically. They believe you because 6 years, 3 years were more about building the trust. So if they see the result, otherwise we have not grown from like 2 kg of mushroom to 1 lakh kg of mushroom. And most of these mushroom producers are from the marginalized family only. Pake Bazaar area.
Can I kindly intervene here? I'm Deepa and I'm a co-host. So I think we had agreed only to take clarifying questions here. We will take these content related and more conceptual questions at the very end. So if you can post them directly on chat, I've just posted a link. I've just posted a note on chat to everyone, and you can also post your questions here directly. At this point, we would just like to take clarifying questions so we keep to time. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you. I think we'll be moving to John to talk about SenseMaker. John?
Okay, thank you, Chimamanda. Next slide, please. So, one up.
This is.
Oh, yeah, sorry, okay. Just to say that I'll be using two terms interchangeably. On the one hand, I'll be referring to SenseMaker, which is the commercial term of what we're going to talk about. And the other term is going to be narrative action research, which is the more academic term. Next point, please. Next slide. So basically, both refers to a narrative action research approach for better understanding and changing the complex real world challenges that we're facing in the world today. Next click, please. So just to be very clear, that SenseMaker is the method for performing the methodology of transformative transdisciplinary research. Just to be very clear. Next slide, please. So methodology is basically the how question. How do we do things? How are we going to make things work? It's the question.
Work this way today if you don't want to come back so early. So all right, no problem. Okay, well when you do come back, if you don't come back
sorry,
too late.
excuse me. I think, sir, I think you are unmuted. All right, John, sorry, go on, please.
I'm muted, yeah. So John, you can go ahead.
Perfect.
Can I carry on?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I was just saying that our fundamental methodological challenge is going to be to demonstrate how working with marginalized women's lived experiences or their stories can contribute to building more resilient communities in Bihar. Click please. Better understanding and building on their existing innovative coping strategies and actions. So just to sum up, you've already heard quite a bit from Prabhat and Chimamanda what it is that we're going, what is it that we want to do in this project, and the methodological challenge is how we're going to do it. And we need to demonstrate how working with marginalized women's stories and their lived experiences may contribute to building more resilient communities in Bihar. Next slide, please. So the question is then, why stories? I mean, why should we work with stories? There's at least three different reasons why it's important. The one is context, that context matters. You've heard this expression a lot, that not only matters, but it matters a lot. And secondly, that sense making is a way of dealing with one's lived experiences, and sense making happens through sharing stories with each other. Can you click, please? So when we're talking about context, firstly, we're not thinking about context just some sort of a static background in which things happen, but we're actually working with a very dynamic concept of context. It's formative context, where that are being shaped and being shaped by social actors, people embedded in a particular context. And then secondly, when we're talking about the sense making of lived experiences, we're saying that this is at the core of human agency, because it is through interpreting and meaning making that people can actually shape their real life situations or their context. And then last, just to say that this means that this kind of research is fundamentally what we refer to as hermeneutic or interpretive type of research. It's all about the sense making of other people's sense making. Click, please. It's a concept that Anthony Giddens referred to as a double hermeneutic. It means that we can't get into the headspace of other people, but we can at least work with the way they're making sense of their situations. So this is what this narrative action research is really all about. Click, please. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to share with you now a couple of African cases, reflections and experiences of where we've used this approach in an African context. Next slide, please. The first story that comes out of Africa is from this Nigerian novelist called Chimamanda Adichie. And she inspired me a lot. And I was looking for some suitable methods to work with. And she's a novelist, and she's written or given this fantastic TED talk, which if you haven't seen it yet, I would strongly advise you to go and have a look at it. And she talks about the danger of the single stories when she does novel writing. She's saying that the danger is that we then fall into the trap of producing stereotypes of people. And her challenge is, as a novelist, how to write novels that captures the many overlapping stories in an African context. This is what she wants to do as a novelist. Click, please. And when I saw this, I said to myself, okay, you're a novelist, this is what you can do, but are there such research methods, click, please, that can do, another one, that can do exactly the same to help us perform and do transformative transdisciplinary research? And this is what inspired me to eventually discover what I nowadays call narrative action research. Click, please, next slide. And this has led me to do some research and discovering the sense maker approach, which was developed by Dave Snowden from Wales, which is really the approach that we're now adopting and using for narrative action research purposes to understand and changing the complex real world challenges facing us today, as I've already mentioned. Next slide, please. Yeah, next slide, please. So when I started to read more about the sense maker approach, I was immediately struck by the multiple cases and issues where it has already been used in different parts of the world. As you can see, it's been used in Africa, Australia, Puerto Rico, and South Africa for many different kinds of issues. Next slide, please. And of course, it was the African case that really attracted my attention most. This particular case called the Girl Hub Project, which was done in 2014. And why I was so inspired by this particular case study was that it was an approach that is both quantitative, qualitative, and transformative at the same time. And when I read this, I felt like old Isaac Newton had sat under the tree, but not one apple fell on my head, but 3 apples fell on my head. The quantitative, qualitative, and transformative apples fell on my head. Next slide, please. And the guiding principles of this approach are about co-design, self-signification, epistemic justice, and distributed cognition and distributed ethnography. And when we work with these guiding principles, when we design the research process together, these guiding principles actually mean that we are working with and through many pairs of eyes and ears of both the experts and lay people, ordinary people, within and between the communities in which they are living and working every day. And these communities may be distributed geographically, socially, administratively across many different regions. Okay, next slide, please. And just to give you some idea of the process of a narrative action research process, we can visualize it both iteratively, as in this circle here. Next slide, please, next click. Or we can straighten it out and give you a more linear version of it, to say there are at least 7 different phases of going through a typical narrative action research approach. We particularly in this project are still very much involved in the preparation phase. We will then go into the second phase later on of co-designing the signification framework. I'll show you just now what I mean by that, with the marginalized people of Bihar. Then we'll go and do some narrative collection. Then we'll come back and do some analysis and sense making. Then we will go and return the stories back to the storytellers and then discuss with them, are there any things that they would like to change in their situations based on their stories? And then last but not least, we will do some vector monitoring and evaluation of the changes that they have decided upon to embark upon. Next slide, please. So when we're talking about co-designing a signification framework, we're talking essentially about these 5 elements: prompting questions, triads, dyads, stones and multiple choice questions. We do not have the time to go through this with you now, but I just want to share with you, these are the elements of a typical signification framework that we will be co-designing with the marginalized women in Bihar. Next slide, please. Yes, and now I just want to share with you a couple more African cases where we've used this approach, just to let you know we've already dirtied our hands, we've already used it quite extensively. Next slide, please. The first is a PhD student of mine, Mpumlani Nkantwana, who's used this for his PhD studies. And he's interested in the area of developmental entrepreneurship in Africa, in the countries of Kenya, Rwanda, and Ghana. He uses this sense-maker approach extensively for that purpose. And then as we speak, this is a live project. Next slide, please. It's what we call the Catalyst project. This is our name for it. And it's also about building a resilient water community in a peri-urban area called Kikuyu in Kenya. And our challenge here is that we don't quite understand yet how this particular community is dependent on and using up to 8 different water sources in the area that they're working in. And this is our challenge, is to better understand this. Next slide, click please. So in order to unpack this, to better understand this, we have brought together 5 important stakeholders. You can see them there: the University of Nairobi, Cardiff University, ourselves, Stellenbosch University, and we're working with a group called Upepo Technologies, and also the Kikuyu County Board. Okay, click please. So how are we going to tackle this particular challenge of better understanding the challenge of resilience for this community? Is we're going to generate a lot of rich quantitative and qualitative data. As we speak, this Upepo technologies are measuring, they're using what they call the Internet of Things, smart technologies. They're busy measuring the quantities and the qualities of the water sources that people are using all the time on a 24/7 basis. That's the quantitative side. And then on the qualitative side, we've just, as we speak now this week, started to collect people's stories of this community. How do they actually experience the water situation, the crises that they're facing in Kikuyu? And then our challenge, you can click please. The challenge is going to be to then integrate the quant-qual data and hopefully produce something like an online or real-time dashboard for decision-making for both the communities and the policymakers. Okay, next slide, please. I just want to share with you some results, how we can use this approach. Pumlani has looked at the results, and it's quite easy. You can, next slide, please. You can quite easily, click please. You can quite easily get hold of the individual stories. As you can see on the left and right hand side here, this is a dyad. If one doesn't just want to look at the patterns, but you also want to look at the individual stories that people have shared with you. Next slide, please. Okay, and that's my presentation. So I'm hoping to answer some clarification questions now.
Yes, so as John said, if anyone has 2 to 3 clarifying questions for him, please unmute yourself and ask. And also, if you can post your questions on the event page in the chat, please. It should be working right now.
Hi, this is Martin. We work in Kenya a lot, have our headquarters there. So John, thanks for the talk. The chat does still seem to be disabled, at least on my computer, just so you know, and I expect for most people. But I'd love to know how you actually collect these stories. Are these structured interviews? Are they digital? How do you actually get the stories of the people? And obviously the way you ask questions is very, very critical as in terms of the type of answers you get. So how do you do this, and how do you make sure you don't ask questions that give a biased result? We've done a lot of interviewing of thousands of farmers over the years, and it's very, very easy to get biased results depending on how you ask the question. So I'd love to hear your approach to that and how you get the stories. Thanks.
Thanks, that's a great question. So our first trick is always to get what we call the prompting question correct. And we like to go for use indirect questions, not leading questions. But it's easier said than done. We normally do this with the enumerators that come from the community, and it takes us sometimes a day or two to get that right. But as we speak, this is what we've done. We've done some training in the Kenyan project with some enumerators, and they've gone out and basically knocked on people's doors. And then we can do pen and paper collection tools, or we can use smartphones and tablets to do an online version of it, the actual collection of the stories. So once somebody has answered a particular prompting question, then we will present them the triads and the dyads and the multiple choice questions, or the stones as we call them, in order to help them to signify the meaning of the stories that they've given to us in the form of the prompting question. But as I said, this is quite a big challenge to formulate the right prompting questions.
Thank you. We have time for just one more question. If not, we can move on to Deepa bringing it all in. Anyone else has anything? We can always ask questions at the end as well. So let's move on to Deepa, who will just give us a slight brief introduction to the project and exchange of views. Thank you, Deepa, on to you. Please let me know when to go to the next slide.
Could you go to the next slide, please? So this is really to wrap up everything that's been said, and before we open the floor to questions. So the point that I want to focus on is that the theme of this entire Stockholm Water Week was on building resilience and faster. And when we look at how we are trying to do that, I think there's an enormous reliance on top-down technological solutions to solve complex, especially climate problems. And there's this very interesting person, Dr. Kentaro Toyama, who is a technologist turned, I would say, social anthropologist, who says that focusing entirely or solely on technological solutions or technology to address complex problems really distracts us from understanding what really matters. And what he says is that, yes, technology can be a game changer, but only when it is deliberately designed to enable a deeper understanding of historical, social, political, economic, and cultural foundations of inequality, which lie at the heart of resilience. So there's also a very interesting TED Talk by Kentaro Toyama that we can share the link with those who are interested. I would certainly ask you to look at it. So this has been very inspirational to us. And I think it partly answers the question raised earlier by a colleague that, you know, does enabling women, marginalized women like the ones that Prabhat, my colleague, talked about, empower them? It might definitely allow them more financial stability and improve their economic situation. But I think empowerment as such, and even resilience, is a much deeper issue that needs to be looked at. And that is precisely why we engage with this tool, SenseMaker. The next slide, Panda. So what is this project all about? It's really about connecting the dots between the bottom up and the ground below, between communities who experience, cope with, and face challenges of various sorts, not just climatic, and experts who are designing and providing interventions and solutions. So we want to really use the SenseMaker to connect these dots to make sense to make better sense of complex ground realities. And how are we going to do that? So one is we're going to collate and analyze lots of individual, unfiltered, gender responsive stories and experiences of inequalities and challenges and vulnerabilities, but also coping strategies in the face of climate change. And as was the question posed, that I think key and very critical is making sure that we allow enough open space and flexibility for people to be able to share their individual unique stories of challenges and their resilience, and not have these influenced by biases that we might have as researchers. At the same time, we believe that just acting on local communities, which is often the case in development, is not, it's not the entire solution. I think it's really important to understand how key institutional actors, including our partners, Sumarth, to begin with, how they understand, and if they're able to see their own gender power biases, which really shapes how they design and implement programs, how they go about doing what they do in the name of climate interventions. So we want to use the sense maker tool to look at these two different or various different audiences, the local communities who are Sumarth members and stakeholders, farmers, and also a host of institutional actors, including Sumarth themselves. And so we want to bring together also these end users and stakeholders to collaboratively and in very inclusive spaces. And here we are really focusing on how do you allow marginalized women who might, because of various gender norms and identities, not be able to come together with key male stakeholders. How can we bring them together? And how can we allow them to make sense collaboratively of what is being provided and what is the ground reality? So by connecting these dots, this is what we want to do. The next slide, Upanda. So this is really to welcome now questions from you and some feedback, and we really want to also learn from you. I think we all would agree that building resilience fast or faster is easier said than done. We would like to learn from you, what will it take to equitably transform the situation in your view? We presented a model that we want to take forward, but we would really love to hear your thoughts on our ideas, on our project, but also your own experiences. So with that, I'd like to open the floor for questions from the audience. Thanks so much.
John, just to check with you, there is a question for you that came in the chat, and it's from Lemasa saying, thank you, John, for the great presentation. Any link to related resources, publications, and tools? Also, you're on mute. So I think you can just direct them. I think Lemasa will be in the files folder or in the chats folder. We'll be pasting his email and his website as well. That includes all resources and publications and further details. But as Deepa said, these are key questions that can help you trigger your thoughts in order to help create a discussion for our session. Also, John, I don't know if you can see my messages on Zoom regarding the SenseMaker app. If you want to share the screen and show them how to play with it, and if you have any data to show them.
I'm still working on the data. Can I share the screen?
Yes, you can, if you want. Yeah. Are you able to do that on the Zoom?
Let's have a look and see.
If not, yeah, you should do that. Yeah. But until then, until as Deepa said, these are key questions after you've heard our presentation. Has your opinion of resilience changed after listening to our presentation? Is it really important to listen to marginalized voices when designing these climate interventions? Does it really matter, or should it just be kept with key institutional stakeholders to make the decisions? Any thoughts, concerns? because this will of course help us when we are developing our project as well. So please unmute yourself, ask in the event page, completely open for discussion. There is a question actually from Vish, please, if I'm butchering her name, I apologize. Vishwanath, he says, or she says, thank you, Deepa Joshi, for an excellent presentation. May I ask, how do you make sure that policies that are being written include these voices and experiences from the ground, most of which still happen in the informal world? Deepa, did you get that? I'm just going to post, I can post the question in the...
Yes, could you post the question? It was not very clear. Yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
So I would just like to answer that policies in general tend to be inclusive, right? So I think we've learned the long and hard way in development of making sure that policies are inclusive. And I think there's more and more a focus on making sure that that happens. I think the SDGs are definitely a step up from the MDGs. And so I think even the data that the graph that Prabhat presented, I think if you look at any government of India policy, nowhere do you find it exclusionary. But I think it's not the policies that matter so much. It's really about what happens in the process of implementing these policies. Where do the policies get diluted? Where did they get misinterpreted? Or what happens in, are these really implementable in different contexts? And do the various institutional stakeholders implementing these policies really understand and are able to address this? Is there an incentive for them to really focus on being inclusive? So I think for me, as somebody who's worked for several years on gender and inclusion issues, I feel policies per se are not a problem. It's really the implementation of these policies, which is an interesting issue. And I think that's something that we want to look at by also going into the institutional black box in this particular project and really identifying how key institutional actors understand and follow through and are able to really implement the policies, or what challenges they face in not being able to do that, or what biases that they bring, which maybe allows them to be less aware and less mindful of what's written into policies. So I think...
Perfect, yeah. Thank you, Deepa, thank you. I think John will be able to share the application, the SenseMaker tool, and also show us some data, which is great. John, over to you.
All right, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so this is just to give you a quick look and a feel, a taste, an ice cream leak basically of what this tool, the power of this tool, what it can do. So we've asked you to just play a bit with one of or two triads that we've asked you to complete. And as we've been speaking, we've got at least nine responses. So let's not look too much at the numbers now. It's just that these are 9 people that have decided to respond. And this is how the one triad is looking like. Where the dots are is where you positioned your responses. Don't look at this. Anticipation should really be in bold. Nobody is elected to put their dots there. And you can see the spread of, there's quite a spread on this particular triad. On this one here, when we asked the question about, do you think that working with people's stories can actually contribute to building resilient communities? Look at the spread here. It's very different to the one on the left-hand side. And look at the 1, 2, 3, 4 responses out of the 9 have said yes, you believe that can be done. So this, of course, is quite important for us to hear that, because this is certainly an assumption that we share with these respondents. So we will keep this site a little bit open for a while, and you can keep on using it and playing with it if you want to. But just to let you know that although it looks quite sparse at the moment, only 9 responses, let's not be taken aback by that. The Kenyan project that I referred to earlier on, over a 2-week period, the enumerators that we've trained have gone out and collected over 400 stories in Kikuyu. So of course, if I'd show you their graphs, it would look very, very different to the 9 here. But the purpose of this was just to demonstrate to you, to give you, as I said, a look and a feel for how one can use the data that comes in when the SenseMaker approach is being used in real time. Okay, that's about all I'd like to say about this for the moment.
Thank you, John. So as you can see, SenseMaker is a live action tool that's able to generate a lot of data and look at and generate qualitative data into quantitative numbers. So to bring it all in, I'd like to invite Alan Nicol, if that's possible, to come and bring it all in and exchange of views.
Thank you, Amanda.
Please.
I don't know if I can bring it all in, but I mean, it's fascinating to listen to these discussions and be part of this. The danger of single narratives, absolutely, it's becoming very clear and abundantly clear that you know, doing resilience faster, but doing it in a way that doesn't incorporate different narratives and stories, lived experiences at a local level is a hazard in its own right, is a risk. So the way that this system of thinking and this research methodology can unpack those narratives, bring them into a useful public policy discourse arena and help shape policy in the way that resilience is constructed in different contexts, like Bihar's Prabhat so brilliantly presented, where you have huge male out-migration leading to enormous pressures on women in communities, and you know, different women in different contexts also have their own narratives of change and resilience building. So the idea that the project has to build out from those narratives to construct a useful way of thinking through different narratives and link them up to decision making and resilience strengthening at local level is absolutely essential to future policy, but also practice. So how can we help communities in such vulnerable contexts strengthen their resilience building over time? So I feel that the approach, the SenseMaker tool, the narrative mapping is absolutely essential. And I think that what we'd like very much for all of all of you participants and all of your institutions is to remain in touch on this project, to be able to continue to build the strength of this tool. We heard from Martin, you know, there are methodological challenges too in asking questions in those contexts, right? So you've got to get the asking right, you've got to get that relationship right as external researchers or internal organizations working within those communities, such that the construction of the output from the tool is very much driven by that iterative discussion with communities and the different parts of communities themselves. So, you know, that in itself, the action research element is absolutely critical. No, I think that there's a hugely important gap, in a sense, in the whole narrative on set of narratives on resilience. And I think this tool and the approach that we're taking in this project, the deeper outline, is absolutely essential to helping chart a way forward. So I would thank everyone and you know, and encourage continued conversations, maybe a community of practice around the use of this tool in the Bihar context would be great, or more widely still, John, is a possibility, I guess, i.e. bringing together experiences in Asia and Africa would be really good. And I would thank everyone again for their participation, and Upanda for your excellent opening remarks, where we're reminded that youth is the future and the engagement of youth narratives is supremely important too. Those are my thoughts. Back to you.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today and for joining the whole Stockholm World Water Week. If there's any more further questions, please post them in the chat and we'll reply to you individually as well. And we shall be posting any resources and links as well on the files tab. And anything else, keep in touch. Anything else from you, Deepa? Mike, Prabhat, anyone else?
No, just to say a big thanks to everyone for their time and attention. And we really, as Alan emphasized, we want to stay in touch. We want to build a community of practice. So please join us. I think on the link, we've shared a space for you to share your name and contact details. We want to stay connected. We want to learn from you. We want to share our experiences of using this fascinating tool. Thanks so much.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, John, Alan, Deepa, Mike, Prabhat, and thank you everyone for joining us today.
Bye.
Have a good day or evening.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.